Okay.
Well, good evening, everyone, on this chilly evening. My name is Richard Waring. I have been a longtime member of the PoemWorks Workshop for Publishing Poets community, and we have a stellar couple of feature poets tonight. But first, I want to start us off with a few sentences by well-known poets, starting with Sharon Olds. She says of writing poetry, you know when you have something that you long to say to someone and you could never say it to them, to their face. Then here's a place, poetry, where you can speak. Our wonderful mentor, Barbara Hyatt, had a wonderful mentor, C.K. Williams, who died in 2015 at the age of 78. He said toward the end of his life, I don't want to spend so much time mastering my craft because I pretty much have that under control. But it's still hard to find the right inspiration and the right voice and the right music to embody the inspiration. That's the primary business of the poet. To bring the matter and the music together. The best poetry, when you're reading it, you hear two voices simultaneously, the voice of the poet and your own voice.
Beautiful.
And lastly, Mary Oliver writes, the tire goes flat, the tooth falls out, there will be 100 meals without mustard. The poem gets written. I have wrestled with the angel, and I am stained with light, and I have no shame. Neither do I have guilt. My responsibility is not to the ordinary or the timely. It does not include mustard or teeth. It does not extend to the lost button or the beans in the pot. My loyalty is to the inner vision, whenever and however it may arrive. If I have a meeting with you at 3 o'clock, rejoice if I am late. Rejoice even more if I do not arrive at all.
That's good.
I love honesty.
That's good.
Well, I have two introductions to give to you simultaneously because we are going to hear alternating voices from our two features. So here we go. Vivian Eyre's new poetry collection, Ishmael's Violets, from Kelsey Books, is forthcoming in January of next year. Her poems have appeared in the Massachusetts Review, Bellingham Review, J Journal, One Art, Pancreas, Quiddity, Spire, the Asheville Poetry Review, the Fourth River, the Orchards Poetry Journal, and 12 Mile Review. Her ekphrastic poems, inspired by Neo Rausch's para paintings, were included in the anthology New Smoke from Black Square Editions, Off the Park Press. The Brunch Poems series, founded by Vivian in 2013, continues its monthly poetry discussions at Floyd Memorial Library in Greenport, New York. As a community member at Imago Foundation for the Arts, she moderates their Poets in Conversation series. Vivian has served as guest curator for the Whale House at the Southold Historical Society Museum in Southold, New York, and as a cold-stunned sea turtle rescue volunteer for New York Marine Rescue. Vivian lives with her companion, Standard Poodle, in Warren, Rhode Island. And Margot Wizansky, her manuscript, The Yellow Sweater, was published by Kelsey Press in 2023. Wild for Life, a chapbook memoir of her near-death experience, was published by Lily Poetry Review in 2021. Her poems are in New Ohio Review, Spillway, Cimarron, Missouri Review, Bellevue Literary Review, and elsewhere. She edited Mercy of Tides, Rough Places Plain, and What the Poet Knows, tribute to Barbara Helfgott Hyatt. She was awarded a residency at Isle of Innisfree, Ireland, by Carla University, and a fellowship in Salt Lake City by Writers at Work. She transcribed the oral history of her friend, Emerson Stamps, whose grandparents were enslaved and his parents sharecroppers. Missouri Review featured her poems about him. She lives with her husband, David, in Mattapoisett, Massachusetts. Please welcome Margot and Vivian.
Here we are.
Hi.
Hi. Well, I'll just start by thanking all of you for coming. I was saying to Richard, we have representation from Maine to California tonight, our family and friends, and to thank Richard for his hosting this series over such a long period of time. I guess as my introduction, I would say that, you know, we tend to separate the human species and the species of the natural world. But in reality, we're all creatures. We're all nature. We're all part of nature. So Margot and I are going to read poems exploring the connections and the resonances between these two fragile families. And I'll start us off with this poem, What the Sea Told Me. Lately, I've been practicing to stay. I stand here like a seawall. It's too cold to sit down. At the water's edge, scored by rollers, there's a glacial moraine, flat-topped like a sea. Maybe it's a chair rock where the ancients once sat with their guides at sunrise, asking for the sea's blessing. In this kingdom of slate gray waves, I have slipped far down into myself. On cobbles of feldspar and quartz, my fears rise. If only I had pause or a leaning staff to walk across what doesn't give. A rush of wind through my coat, that old urge to turn away, my old way to flee. It came to me like a person. What changes me is outside of me. The riprap loosens. It's a kind of grace how I found this cove. Without the asphalt road cutting through the corridor of pines, lofty shadows, juncos, and sparrows. Without the villager's hand-sketched map, I never would have heard the sea's words. Come closer.
My father never told me. The year of his bar mitzvah, his father died suddenly. Things he didn't talk about. He never sang again, only whistled sometimes. His mother remarried the plumbing supply king, who refused to have teenagers in his house. So she left my father and his sister alone in the apartment. Did his mother come back to wash his clothes, put up dinners, while her new husband sold clean-out plugs? Her death certificate says divorced, but when? What grounds? He must have gnawed on her absence in that cramped apartment, must have taken it to school, let it lunge after him on the playground. His 15-year-old face already shattered with new beard, his shirts unironed, no forgiveness in him, holding on to the hurt that grew while he sat bitter on his brown tweed chair for the rest of his years, listened to the days dwindle down to a precious few, dead at 54, just like his father.
Mm.
Oh, his stuttering heart. He never told me how bad it was.
Mm.
The circle of several centers. It was all visible at the water's surface. How the mother orca swam, pushing her calf in front, or carried its body on her forehead swelling, or in her mouth, which meant she couldn't eat. Was she trying to rouse, spark, kickstart the lungs? The way hope can be part reflex. The mist of 30 blowholes behind the mother's wake, each whale taking a turn to push. How wide is the circumference of loss?
Mm.
Whether the sky was moonlit or moonless, by the sun's travel lamp, she swam, pushing, carrying her calf 100 miles in a circle, twice. It takes time to loosen the twists in a figure-8 knot, but how to square the heartbeats, briefly there, like tiny kicks, inside a mother's belly as the mother folds the never-used onesie into a plastic bag. How big must a brain be to feel sadness, mouthfeel of salt, swimming so close to loss, the closeness visible above the water surface.
Wow.
My first time. The memory buzzes under my skin like neon. In my early 20s, before I understood my daily risk of harassment and humiliation, before I had grievances, before I knew I was entitled to grievances, I was at the gynecologist, wrapped in a Johnny, lying down on the examining table, knowing in the observing part of my brain that a nurse was supposed to be with me, afraid of what the doctor might find. And he entered the room, friendly, an older man, asked me a few questions, and then commanded, "Slide on down here, Margot. I'm going to fill you full of cold steel."
Oh my God. Wow.
Well shot, live stream on Instagram. Seated in a shallow craft, that red bikini girl. Expanse of ocean, a blue-gray backdrop. With eyes flashing light, her lithe body swivels to smile at the camera lens. A long, thick shadow sidles up. The voice behind the lens says, "Oh my God, turn around, look." I see it. The orca's head rising, slick from the seamouth. Over Mystery's rim, sheening with suntan oil, her fingers skim the whale's thin, translucent skin. Know nothing of how oxides soak through. This one touch lifts this girl weightless from the gravity of her land body. Yes, I too have touched wonder, washed my hands, without washing the one I touched.
An early case, 1961. Mother's elegance, her fashion sense, Christian Dior suit and pillbox hat, her buying trips to Paris, her talent for selling cocktail dresses to the rich, amounted to nothing the night her boss, widower and sole owner of that flagship department store, a palace, antiques everywhere, crystal chandeliers, white-gloved atomizer women spraying French perfume. And in the cafe, drinks 2 jiggers strong, whipped cream 5 inches high, invited her to dinner. And she, expecting the other buyers for drinks in his suite at the Waldorf Astoria, knocked on his door. He was alone, wearing a bathrobe, nothing else. She thought she'd interrupted his shower until he untied the bathrobe, let it hang open, and made her a proposition. Divorce your husband, marry me, and your children will want for nothing. Her broad smile dimmed, and she composed herself, took her leave, trying not to register shock or offend him. Still, the next day, he fired her. Your performance, he said. And for 50 years, she never told anyone, even after she was scooped up to run another fancy dress shop, even after my father died without kicking that man's sorry ass, even after Anita Hill testified. Well turned out at 90, wearing a silk scarf and 3 necklaces, still believing she'd asked for it somehow. Mother told me for the first time about the miserable sandwiches her boss had ordered in that night for dinner. White bread, buttered, with a little slice of ham.
Wow.
Floods. Again, the causeway floods. Rings of rising tide mark the road stanchions, the way you measure a child's height on a wall. Behind a line of cars, my car, water deepening around the legs of the patrolman guiding our turnarounds. I turn up the heater, turn on talk radio. A panel debates climate change. Brr, so much for global warming, one man snickers. The water's engine rolls out sheet after sheet. Sun glances off the surface like the Delacroix painting, where light glances off a bed sheet, where a man shows off his naked mistress to her husband by holding a sheet in front of her face. The husband shows no eyelash of recognition. He doesn't see what he's lost, the way we don't see how the rain increases its sumptuous weeping. Now I hear voices, the woman in the painting and this flooded causeway saying, take a long look. I'm not going to be here forever.
Hmm.
If the goddamn war hadn't happened, goddamn war, if my father hadn't worked nights at the shipyard, if he could have used his education in the law, if he hadn't had to help in the family business, medicine cabinets, if that family business hadn't gone under, if his father hadn't died so young, if my grandmother hadn't married again, left him alone to fend for himself, if he hadn't traded Xerox too soon, if he'd forgiven himself, if he'd moved us to a big house on Lehigh Parkway, if my mother hadn't clicked down the stairs in high heels, Chanel No. 5, a backless dress for the cocktail party, if not for my father's leaky heart, if he could have spent his days trolling for tuna on the deep and warm and boundless, if the Phillies ever went all the way.
Oh my.
Ode to the Cold Stunned Sea Turtle. Where in these nets of light, in this tide, can I find you? Once you knew how to nose out of the birth egg's shell, with moonlight and stars your signs, to shimmy the downslope into open blue. Your flippers quick slapped the undersea, a frantic rush to cross the salty vastness. All your senses trusting the way it's always been. How soundly you slept, blind-stitched into a sea pocket. Missed the cue of the water's cooling. Yes, the sea changes around us, changes us in ways we barely detect. But I hope it isn't true. The only way I see how much the sea has changed is by losing you.
Mm.
Mm.
If time could flow backward, my father would still dance the two-step in new cowboy boots he bought at the shop in the square. Everyone would eat the picture-perfect turkey I'd roasted, and we'd listen to Frankie play cello in the living room. The 22-pound tuna, untaxidermied, unglued from the plaque, commemorating the only prize my father ever won, would swim off Miami, the hook unhooked from its mouth. If time flowed back to our house on Ott Street, to the Chesterfield chair he collapsed in every night post-heart attack, the upholstery would be taut as the day it was new, and his fake gold watch for the 25 years he worked at SureFit slipcovers, tucked into its velvet-lined box, would go back to Gerard Perregaux. The time before his children disappointed him with our separate mistakes, our first disagreeable mates, our salvage operations. My father's ashes would gather themselves to fly out of the Caribbean, where mother casts them off Grand Aunt's beach, cruise back to New York aboard the Ocean Pearl in a cardboard box, his bones rattling all night.
Mm.
Letter to Sereno Edward Bishop, the 12-year-old cabin passenger on a whaling schooner.
Mm.
Were you a little night bird flying into the fire on the schooner's deck? Were you like moonlight that strobed the lonely faces of whalemen as you traveled alone to an unknown divinity school. You have to love a thing to study it. More closely than the seabirds circling the deck, you studied the men who caught 3 albatrosses, although it was Sunday. The birds can't fly after they're on the deck or walk. It's ridiculous. The cruel mesh of the foot, the missing hind toe, the wobble to stand up, wing, seesaw wing. The birds fall over. They killed and skinned them, you wrote, but didn't say how or why. You must have stood on the deck, your souls bloodied from bird and whale. Did afraid invisible light shield you from the I don't care ways, from the wheel of the day? You must have carried those shiny parables to divinity school, inside your chest, a nest of ashes.
I didn't know the earth was dying. Nothing was perishable. Nothing was miraculous to me either, not even the sun. Its multiple orbs illuminating every living thing. Trees lifting their branches to meet it halfway. Cabbages rolling their roundness toward it. The deep, abiding sun I knew nothing about in my 20s, hardly looked at, shades drawn, could have been shining or not. And I missed the brushstrokes of all the starry nights, focused on that great burning in my center, a mystery interesting only to me. I wasn't singing to an abundance of world, didn't detect any force or light. I wrote a little at the edge of things, couldn't move past the turmoil in my head. Is a poem a kind of litany? Was it only once when I was a girl that I skated to the outside of town on a frozen stream, miraculous, ephemeral? I looked down at fish and leaves, frozen together under clear blackness.
The end. The epigraph is dedicated to the 177 orcas who have died in captivity in United States marine parks, and to the 5,000 captive whales who have died worldwide. No one knows what plays in the mind's dark theater when ropes hold them afloat at the end. What songworm hums in a motionless whale body? Mating trills? The eager tenor of takeaway ships? Or mothers' cries? Because mothers cry like animals for young ones lost. No one knows what taste lingers in the mouth's recall, herring or blood, ribboning through the red knotted thread. Don't remember me, but remember my fate. At the end, the fluke's reflex to furl and unfurl is called the last swim. Then, through the portal, a dreamlike shimmering, its mother's deepest dive, beyond spout smoke rising, beneath the ink-spilled moon. Blackfish
formal as a royal palm. They hired a woman to watch us and flew off to Havana, where the Hotel Nacional's gilded grandeur was peeling away, and it was always nighttime in the bar. Years later, in dementia, my mother remembered the way escorts in cocktail dresses sat on stools under chandeliers low enough to be their hats, veiled in smoke from the salesmen's cigars. My father took his dark rum straight, strolled with my mother on the Malecon, a fashion runway cooled by sea spray. She wore Dior. In his dark suit, he was formal as a royal palm. Before the music crept away to hide in alleys and the satin voices went back to shining shoes for a living. Before the embargo sent all the salesmen home stateside. Before Havana's resplendent days turned sick at heart.
Added in gasps of wonder. Although the channel was off limits, he was steering there. For the tip jar to fill, they had to see whales. The baby whale backflipped away from its mother. From the sun deck, this was clear. That single breath geysered too close to the boat. Like this, he'd said, rocking his hand side to side, how the boat shook when the baby whale and its mother swam under the hull, like a minivan and a double-wide bus. It took time to cut the engines, he'd said. Sitting next to him at the dive bar, I could picture those white pleated torpedoes, that velvet rushing forward toward the four-blade propellers. It was useless to ask if the whale's skin had been scraped or gashed. He was swallowed by the oh, oh, oh from a coterie of tank tops, buying rounds to salute that onboard day. I heard him say, "Who will swim with me? Who will cruise with me tomorrow?"
The black slacks. At the boundary waters of her decline, my little mother decides she needs new black slacks. So thin from salting her food, forgetting to eat, I'm trying to find her what fits. My little mother's decided she needs new black slacks. In the dressing room, she holds a pair in her hands. I'm trying to find her what fits. She can't remember if she's about to try them on or take them off, the pair she holds in her hands. She knew retail, high end. It was her life. She can't remember if she's about to try them on, slacks on the floor, on the chair, lopsided on hangers. She knew retail, high end. It was her life. Soon we find a rhythm. I hand her a pair. Slacks on the chair, the floor, on lopsided hangers. She tries them, rejects them. I whisk them away. Soon we find a rhythm. I hand her a pair. After she tries them, I give her another. She tries them, rejects them. I whisk them away. These fit, she says, the very pair she wore this morning. I'm finished giving her another pair to try. So thin from salting her food, forgetting to eat. These fit, she says, the very pair she wore this morning at the boundary waters of her decline.
Mm.
Speak memory. What do you think? My dad asks the shop boy in the marine supply store. They look great, the teen nods towards my dad's boat feet. And I guess they did, considering the cracks across his orthopedic sneakers that he'd been wearing. Plimsolls, Dad announces, remarkably, since he often calls me by my sister's name. Later, he'll ask me the name of these boat shoes. Sounds like a gin cocktail, umbrella, pimples, that pine-scented aerosol. Once I say plimsoll, he'll say load line on a hull, as if we're playing the game. What is it? It's the waterline on the hull of a ship. If the sea rises above the line, cargo drenches. Here in this shop, Dad stare hypnotic in a full-length mirror. Staring at what? His tonsured head, the half-moon pouches under his eyes, belly swell against the buckle's despair, the patch where needles for dialysis bit. Okay, son, he says, not to the shop boy who's vanished, not to me. I want to believe that he's speaking to the part of himself before nautical twilight, the stars still bright enough to vessel out to sea.
Very nice.
A race car made of sand. Everything made my mother nervous. The baby crying, sand on the floor, the flies. So we went out to the beach. I took my bucket and shovel. My mother sat my little brother up on her shoulders and carried the towels and a canvas chair for my father. He'd had a heart attack and was too weak to carry anything. He wore his cabana suit, light green with white palm trees, his legs pale like the hotel room sheets. He hadn't shaved. His face had been bluish for weeks, the circles under his eyes dark as his beard. Mother said I was too heavy to sit in his lap. All afternoon, I dug a string of frantic little ponds. Nothing was right. My back was sunburned. My father hardly moved. Uncle Robert came on a bus from the city to build me a race car of sand with jar lids for hubcaps and for headlights, clamshells. And he found a quoit on the beach for the steering wheel. He dug me a driver's seat that just fit and a rumble seat for my little brother. My father peeled me an apple with his penknife in one long piece that didn't ever break.
Provincetown lobster diver, swallowed by a humpback whale on Jimmy Kimmel Live.
Right.
Epigraph. I wasn't technically swallowed, the diver says. Jimmy says, I got a show to do. I'm going with swallowed. Inside the wide open mouth of a papier-mâché whale, that diver sits, knees bent, like a boy scrunched into a bumper car. Eyes shuddering, he recalls sensation as if inside a car hurtling headlong into a churn of sea. Whiplash raising his neck hair. Under stage lanterns, his face reddens. The blush of death flushed out in front of a live audience. They laugh, teeth showing, like the laughter of Romans when lions rushed into the Colosseum, the songs of our indifference. From the farthest distance, I can glide into that diver's fears. My first terror, the dive, gulped into the sea's pit, my arms feeling paper thin. And dear whale, what did you feel when that force crossed your home's threshold and entered you? I know it's not right to imagine that you feel like me, but you do use language after all. Something was wounded when that diver kicked you until you spit him out. My tongue touches scar tissue, the knotted line inside my cheek. My body is an archive with spectacles, emptiness, the resurrections returning us to the abyss, to the gulf of communion, wider than a giant mouth agape.
Wow.
Danger, after Tova Friedman. We stumbled into a dark, mud sliding our feet, thorny underbrush grabbing our ankles. Boys, neighborhood boys in those innocent woods, sitting on wooden crates they hauled in, sitting beside oily black water, maybe a swamp or a pond. Could have been cottonmouth snakes, could have been swamp rats swimming, could have been raped, could have fallen and disappeared. No street lights, no buildings to get our bearings, giddy from the secrecy, giggling, drinking near beer with the boys, showing off their private secret high. Not fallen boys, just boys showing off, not touching, not sex. It wasn't danger. I didn't know danger. The barracks, Nazis stomping big black boots, danger. Your mother made you hide under a woman just dead, warm at first, you so small and still, so small.
Wow.
Whale watch. After Kara Hoblin's watercolor, Whale. Whale, the color of moonlight. So pale, I see inside your body, the bones sketched in lamp black ink, the enveloping seas like bruises, aubergine, pink, hospital green. I want my arms around this body, the long, streamlined, knobby spine I long to touch before she breaches out of the sea, twirls acrobatically mid-air, plunges with one brash slap to break open the sea door. I want to caress the flesh ripped at the flare of the fluke by iron barbs or blunt force blows. I want the flipper, the bony flanges, so like a human hand in my hands, as light as a scrim of mist.
Hmm.
Wow.
Good sleep. My mother said she never slept. She always slept on the very edge of her bed, as far away as she could get from her second husband, in places intended for wakefulness, in the library, on a bench, or in a chair where she could disguise her dozing. She gave herself to sleep. In the first row orchestra at Much Ado, in front of the giant TV in the lounge, the Phillies night game grinding down, until the security guard woke her, walked her back to her apartment. A wakeful night after a day of many little sleeps. In the morning asleep, when her gentleman called to be sure she'd made it through. And when we drove her from Philly to Boston for the holidays, 6 hours in the back seat, asleep. Such a good sleeper, my mother.
Power naps.
Mhm.
They're motionless, vertical. The mother sperm whale napping with squid tentacles wilting from her mouth, like ribbons quivering in the current. The calf sleeps, tail standing, too. They seem like carved shamans between peace and precipice. How those muscled bodies make me shiver. The large blunt heads, almost comical. The calicites, shaped like archipelagos. Are they dreaming? What is dream but clouds seeking abandoned shadows? I dream about glass-bottom boats, constellations, failing Latin, falling, finding a secret room in my house. Their spiracles are quiet. Do they dim the lights in the brain room to stop breathing? I want answers, but I can't find my body to rise and to leave them. How starstruck I am when a gold vein slips through the crack of my unknowing. The futility of a sure thing. When would the pencil drop from Einstein's hand to wake him from a nap? Might Melville have written about a pale squid if he'd seen this suspended grace? I read his mother guarded her precious afternoon nap, a bliss of slumber after repast, never belonging to mothers alone.
Exaltation. Every day, the rapture of birds, sunset approaching in red velvet shoes, leaving prints where the sky touches water, that radiance reflecting on the sea's flatness, dark blue-violet streaks I want to plunge my face into. Improbable red blazes on the west side of every tree. Fades to dusk. The ordinary story of night beginning. And soon the moon, the shiver of stars. Once in Oxford, I heard the Magdalen College boy choir, the only time I felt exaltation in a chapel. Those ruby bright, unbroken voices praising, no matter who they praised, their clear madrigals soaring past a multitude of polychrome saints, scaling the Gothic arches to a place I'd never been, a place where I might fly.
Hmm.
We want to thank you very much for your attention and your support and your comments and all your smiles. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful reading. I loved how you braided things together, naps followed by hours. So many wonderful images.
Yeah.
I just took right into my body. Really,
Mm.
so much.
It was really wonderful to hear your poems. And especially the ones that I haven't heard from, about your explorations with whales in the ocean.
Mm.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And Margot's yours stand up no matter how many times I've heard them.
Now, I have the pleasure of not only listening to Margot, but also reading while Margot
Oh,
reads in her beautiful voice. So I'm doubly blessed.
Well, be sure to look through the chat because a lot of your stunning words are repeated there.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, up next, we have a lively open mic session to hear from others in the room. And I want to start with Diana Cole, who has to leave early.
Mute.
There you go.
Okay. Okay, right?
Yes, you're
I'm
good.
getting rid of a bunch of messages that are in front of me. Thank you. Thank you very much, Margot and Vivian. It's just inspiring. And I love the way that you interwove them. You know, it's just like enhanced. Each voice enhances the other, and each thing you say widens the circumference, as was said in one of the poems. So I guess I'll read a poem that's fairly new. It's called Trompe l'œil at the Museum. I look away, you are gone. I trail after the first reasonable thought. You have moved on to the roof garden. I search galleries where we scrutinized the illusion of something there, which is just paint, but each room is empty. Still not worried, I climb to the roof, ready to laugh when the doors open and you will be circling the garden sculptures, a large baby doll, a woman thrusting her bronze head over the wall. The baby, it might cry. Its fat legs might pop. The woman might follow her thought down as I go down, back to the first gallery where I last saw you, back to the paper knives, playing cards, the wasp that seems to fly off the grapes. Really, it is not a large museum, and how could I miss you, tall as you are? I, like Zevsky's, try to draw back the tattered curtain. The eye deceives the eye. And just like that, have you gone for good? Will you never more than a momentary take in the wrong direction?
Thank you, Diana.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Cynthia Bargar.
Hi. Beautiful reading tonight. Thank you both, Vivian and Margot. Such a pleasure. I'm going to read a poem that's called Snake Duplex 1. Not in a Tinderish way, but let's meet up. Think magician, but suspect ghost. Quiet ghost, minus magic rabbits. The quiet ghost keeps busy collaging incongruity. Busy incongruity, like a snake wrapped around a damsel's neck. Snake wrapped, not shrink wrapped, sacred choker. Weeds in my garden shouting, you'd better come. You'd better, as they weed wrap the cosmos, but I crave more sleep, want to linger, to burrow. I want you to know when I crave, I burrow. Scratchy blanket from which no exit. Scratching at the blanket, I unlatch quiet. Not a hint of tinder. Let's meet up. Thanks.
Thank you. Up next, we have Margot Flanders.
Margie Flanders.
Sorry.
Yeah, I just have to say again, just a beautiful conversation between two beautiful voices. It's going to stay with me for a long time, and I love what I've heard since. I'm getting into the solstice mood, so this is sort of a solstice poem. It's called Message to Self. The bear who bent the steel pole that holds our bird feeder has not returned. So walk the moon path, trance out, follow the improvisational song of snow on last leaves. Go where birds take you. Violin yourself into a dance with winter. Accept fate and the gift of light. Pick up the mic, make sacred noise. Open your arms to the language of tree and stone. Stamp your feet on earth. She can take it, and it makes you both stronger.
Thank you. Wonderful. Up next, we have Sarah Snyder.
I just want to say that from many of our collective mentors, the collective mentor, Barbara, I just feel like, Vivian, you touched the whale.
Yeah.
And Margot, you touched your parents in ways that were just so beautiful and powerful. So thank you both. I'm going to read a fairly recent poem called Garden Talk. Eve's fractured outline. No mother, hungry for something, exiled and blamed for millenniums. Her life on display for all to comment on. Everyone booing when she comes on stage, knowing her hand in the banning. She made us leave, and yet I want to hold her, forgive her, give her this splintered, luminous world she gave me, though I know I will die. Perhaps she could have eaten an apricot or a fragile peach. Perhaps there would have been no heavy aftermath, no need for fig leaves, just peach juice running down a naked chin, a naked neck, a naked breast, all left the same. No pilgrimage into the unknown, no snakes without feet, no pain in childbirth, no death. But no wisdom in that ease and sweetness. Eve thrust into a dying world to mother others in a way she was never mothered, and her sons, how they grew up, and one murdered the other. I always feel for the mother, that sick man with an assault weapon who murdered all the innocents, our mother. What is she doing now, besides bearing grief and failure? And the mothers of the dead, all of us breaking. Death only palatable for the long-lived, or those who endured as best they could. I sit and talk with 98-year-old Mary on Fridays. Her words knotted and tangled. Do you like to garden? I ask. And she begins a journey of strangeness, flecked with remembered phrases, as a matter of fact, or as the saying goes. And then there is no saying. So I fill in. Seeds seem like magic? She nods and says almost everything does. Aren't we all heading back to the garden, to that mystery in the darkness below the earth?
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. Wendy Drexler.
That was such a gorgeous reading. It made me so happy.
Yeah.
Sharon, Vivian, Margot, Vivian, Margot. I felt so enlarged, elevated, uplifted. A bunch of other E words, ecstatic, whatever. Just by all that compassionate creature caring and both your words, and really, really just gorgeous. This is an ekphrastic poem based on an image from the Webb telescope. Oh, bright star at the center of the Southern Ring Nebula, NGC 3132. You are sexier than a centerfold, your dust-busting lust, your spooling vortex, your grade school tomfoolery, your firebox jewelry that makes me drool, your glossy blue stew swirling like a womb, like a tomb, your boom, boom, boom careening roomlessly, no midnight or noon. Why, in your baby photos, you are so young, you're just begun. The unquiet eye of your no end zone, so far away from me and my home, moaning those lonesome all alones, no mother tongue, star-flung, like me, a dying one, lingering and glittering and quivering in the arc and ache of our sun.
Wow.
Thanks.
Yes, amazing. Up next, Carla Schwartz.
Wow, what a night of poetry, and especially to hear Vivian and Margot, and then Wendy's poem just now was amazing. And I am going to read one poem, I guess, and being reminded that we're coming on the winter solstice, I will read a poem called Winter Solstice. Each day, another minute of daylight swallowed. I count the days forward to lengthening light. I count backward through the shortening too. Yesterday, my dead mother turned 90. My father hadn't noticed. For days prior, death inhabited his live skeleton. Each labored breath rattled his stiffening lungs. Newly arrived 3 weeks before, my father sat propped up in his hospice bed, as plump as a squirrel in late autumn. A menu in one hand, he eyed the meal before him. Then ghosts began to visit his dreams, some horrible scenes that frightened him. In one, he replaced Placido Domingo on stage. In another, a famous chemistry professor went postal. The waning December light shines in through the blinds. Each day, my father eats less and less. Each day, another minute of daylight swallowed. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, please welcome Connemara Wadsworth.
And I'm going to read an old poem that was just accepted in a magazine, so I'd forgotten about the poem.
Congrats.
On a flight from Boston to Paris, the night stretches long, before the man in the next seat and I introduce ourselves. First, the simple things, the world of work, how we made those choices as if spinning out the first threads of friendship. The plane darkens, others sleep, we keep talking. I will meet the husband in my failing marriage, he his girlfriend. Is it my hunger or sitting side by side in the depth of darkness, not looking eye to eye, that sucks me in to the fleeting intimacy of fellow travelers? I want to sew his friendliness into me, want his name, phone number, want to keep that ease. I don't. He moves toward warmth and I toward lonely facts. We walk out apart. I watch him at the other end of bags that circle and circle until claimed. I see how I am a stranger, grasping at what won't be.
Wow.
And I want to thank everybody for their work and reading it, sharing it. It's really lovely.
And now please welcome Sharon Foley.
I really enjoyed Margot and Vivian's reading. You took time, and that helped really to listen to it really well. This is a poem that is from a chapter book called A Kind of Mercy. It's a book on poems of my life, my early life as a Sister of Mercy. A visit with my bedridden father. It took 2 years to get permission to see my father. I begin to imagine my first words with him. Beautiful day. And he will answer, did you see the light ripple on the stone wall? But it rains on my first day. I say, I wish the rain would stop. And he replies, it always has. He's wearing a blue Johnny my mother made from one of his old shirts. There is a cross above his bed, a big wooden one with metal Jesus, a touch of red paint on the wounds. Dad's been carving oak into a bowl. He has rubbed with linseed oil. My habit does not scrape his floor. My breasts are bridled by blue gamp. I am Sister Mary Sharon now. It's against the rules, but for him, I lift my veil to show him a wisp of my hair. I have come from the high-ceilinged cloister. In this tiny room, he seems so small to me.
Wow. And now a wonderful male voice, our penultimate poet, Steve Nickman.
What an enchanted evening. I've been writing some poems about doing therapy with children. This is called The Mushroom on the Dollar Bill.
Oh, yes.
His only agenda was to keep me from having an agenda. Trying to engage him, I took a dollar bill from my wallet and asked if he could turn George Washington into a mushroom. He gave it a dismissing glance. I should have stopped there, but persisted in my cleverness, found it for him, folded the bill in 2 places, handed it to him for inspection. He slid it into his pocket. When we went out to the waiting room, his mother trilled, "Did you get anything out of him?" I had no time to explain. Therapy doesn't work that way. He was already outside on the lawn, ready to move on to his next victory.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, I will close out our evening with another whale poem because, as you know, it's a large subject. Whale song. How dare they kill my family in massive numbers during the war for our precious oil? How dare they make soap from us and thus their damn glycerin and then nitroglycerin to make their artillery shells fly? Our oil didn't corrode, didn't freeze in the damn cold, went into the jute fabric that lined their trenches. Soldiers slathered their feet with our oil, warmed themselves around whale oil stoves. They slurried their faces with our grease to fight the frigid air. Our bodies are a hymn, both ancient and modern. Of course, our brain oil burns the cleanest.
Mm.
Well, another wonderful evening. Let me
Mm.
change our view so we can see us all.
Thank you, Richard. It was a good evening.
Yes, indeed.
Mm.
And one of our open mic readers, Sarah Snyder, will be reading for us in May. And Sharon Foley will be coming up next month.
Nice.
Stay tuned.
Mhm.
We've got some great things ahead.
Mm.
And keep on writing, people.
Yeah, you too,
Oh.
Richard.
You too.
Mhm.
Group
Thank you.
that really belies the statement that I think Stanley Kunitz said, that sometimes the poet has to become the person that can write the poem.
Mm.
And the fact that we're a somewhat older group
Mm.
have worked our way into these meaningful messages to the world in a way that these young whippersnappers that are getting all the prizes, they pale compared to us. So keep on keeping on.
Um,
I'd just like to put in a plug for some of the locals among the little squares here, that Cynthia, Bargar, and I will be reading this Sunday at the Concord Library at 3 p.m. in a round robin, not
Fantastic.
dissimilar from what Margot and Vivian did, but kind of unplanned.
Nice.
Wow.
mhm.
Also, the end of this month, I'll be reading on Zoom for the Worcester County Poetry Association. They have on Tuesday, the 26th, day after Christmas, 7 p.m. You can register for this reading through the WorcesterCountyPoetry.org website. Carla Schwartz would be who you look for.
Mhm.
And feel free to advertise on the PoemWorks site.
Okay.
It's always welcome.
Yeah.
And please buy the yellow sweater. How
Yeah.
is that available, Margot?
It's available through Kelsay Books. That's Kelsay. It's also available wherever books are sold online.
Mhm.
So
Check
here it is. If you can
And-
see this gorgeous. So say,
Wow.
Margot, what you're going to say
Yellow
about.
sweater.
I can't see you.
Oh, you can't?
I can.
No, that kind of looks like the planet Earth.
Right.
It's a body.
Yeah, it's
It's
a
a
body.
nude that my father did in 1936.
Wow.
The night he met my mother in a life drawing class.
Wow.
Isn't that
You see
amazing?
the kind of
And
greenish.
it somehow survived for 70 years.
Wow, that's
Amazing.
great.
And Vivian has a new book.
Yes, and my book is just out, even though I told Richard it wouldn't be out until January.
Yes.
It's
Oh, great.
surprised us.
Mhm.
So there
Excellent.
it is, also on Amazon or Kelsay Books.
Mhm.
And just to say, you know, Margot, thank you so much for being my partner. I really
Oh,
loved reading.
thank you for being mine.
It,
That was
it
great.
was really wonderful.
It was.
You
It was
Very
great.
so
Yeah.
knowing in how you followed one another. You know,
Mhm.
it wasn't this random act. You really put a lot into this braiding of your work together, and it went really well.
You did, yeah.
And thank you to all the open people who read at the open mic, amazing poems, and thank you, Richard. And
Yes.
no, it was so great. It was great.
Mhm.
Don't ever stop doing this.
Oh, it does my heart good.
Yeah, right.
Maybe I could have avoided heart surgery if it happened more regularly, but
Well, just call us, we'll all read to you.
Right. Mm.
well, wonderful.
Glad to see you here, Richard.
Yes.
Mhm.
Live and
Mhm.
healthy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
As they say, good to be with you. Close to the alternative.
Right, right.
Well,
Right.
take care, everyone.
Yeah.
You too.
Bye.
Very
Bye.
good.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye.